feel like an old person using an iPad sometimes. I feel like I see a lot of older people using iPads these days.
I use an iPad.
Well.
Welcome to Chaffin Church, the Chaffin Church podcast. My name is Marty Holman, and this is Ryan Thompson. I'm going to say this. I feel like I need to say this. I say it at the end, but we want to get some more We've developed a little bit of traction here with our podcast. So if you wouldn't mind clicking the subscribe button, whether you're watching on YouTube, can you subscribe on chaffin.church?
You cannot subscribe to the YouTube channel on, no, you can't. I'm sorry. Yeah, you cannot subscribe on chaffin.church, but you can watch live with other people on Sunday. So there's like a live chat, and you can have fun with other people making fun of Marty and I. Oh, you know what? We need to shut the air conditioners off. We're going to cut. We'll be right back. That was embarrassing.
We had the air conditioners on. It's nice, cool, and refreshing in here, though.
It is. It feels pretty nice right now. Is that a cricket? Do I hear a cricket in here? I hope there's not a cricket in here. Or is... Do you hear that?
Oh, yeah, I definitely heard that.
Listeners and viewers, I don't know if you hear that, but we might have to go on a cricket hunt after this.
It's crickets in here.
Yeah.
So you can download the app, and also you can subscribe and share the Chaffin Church podcast. Specifically, not only, but specifically if you live in this area of Holden, Massachusetts. I love this area. My parents, of course, came. They were here last week. And my parents were talking about moving here.
Wow.
That could be great, or it could go miserable. I haven't lived with my parents or near my parents since the early 90s.
The real question, wow, that's a long time. The real question is, are they thinking of moving here because of you and Carrie and the grandkids, or is it because of Specialty Sandwich Co.?
I actually think it's because he's a much better preacher than I, and he knows he could easily take my job.
Oh, you think there's going to be competition?
Oh, he's good.
He's going to come
here. He brought it last week. If you were here, he was good on the podcast.
Yeah, he was.
The numbers are really good for our podcast, but also here, live on Sunday. He just hit it out of the park. So, and he's a great dad. Speaking of dads, today, when this podcast is launched, is Father's Day. So what are you going to get your dad for Father's Day?
You know, my Father's Day gift giving was actually very easy because,
really?
Well, you've met my dad before.
Yep.
Very stoic guy, and he's just... he's like Spock, right? He's just very, very focused, and so he's just a very practical guy. So he actually asked me to get him a particular thing, which was a soil testing kit. Yes, for Father's Day. He wanted it tests the temperature of the soil, the acidity of the soil, things like that. And so I've already actually given it to him, and
really?
He's already started to use it. That was his.
Wow.
That was his Father's Day.
So you're done.
So I'm done. I got him a card I'm going to give him, but other than that, my work is done.
Well, I tell Carrie, this is what I want for Father's Day.
Some sleep. I saw you stifle that yawn. I saw it.
It's true. I had a rough night last night.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
I stayed up too late playing Xbox, and then I woke up too early. But I did score 7 goals in 3 games.
Oh, my goodness.
So there you have it.
It's not easy to do on the new FIFA.
No.
I've heard.
So, anyways, I tell Carrie I think I should add sleep. So
You should add sleep.
I know that was a joke, but I think I should add sleep. But secondly, I want a steak dinner, which will automatically move me towards sleep, right? Church, steak dinner. Sometimes I add to that Texas Roadhouse. because I want those
Oh.
honey rolls, you know.
Oh, the honey rolls, yeah.
Right.
They are good.
And then finally, I typically usually ask for a movie, to go see a movie. So this year, I'm going to see The Quiet Place 2.
John Krasinski, who I know is one of your favorite people,
It's
just in general.
Just in general.
You're a big fan.
I am. I think he's a big fan of mine too in this podcast.
I would not be surprised if John Krasinski had heard
I
of
have
us.
no proof, and I just totally lied. But he's a good dude. He just seems like a nice guy. That guy, like,
Doesn't he?
right? Like, do you think he does? I mean, Chaffin
you know,
Good News
I will
thing-
say this, Marty. I feel like
Chaffin Good.
I've seen a lot of people in movies and singers and even politicians. They seem like nice people, and they turn out not to be. So
Solid point. A lot of pastors are like that,
it's so true,
right?
It's so true.
Name one right now. Name a pastor who seemed like a nice person. Are you gonna pull like what my dad did last week? And
I'm trying to think of one who. Well, I guess he didn't really seem like a nice guy, but I looked up to him for a time. Was John Piper and Mark Driscoll. Neither of them actually did anything that was like they didn't like kill baby seals or whatever, but they were sort of like you're just mean people. Once they got on Twitter and started getting out there, and I got to see a little bit of them off the pulpit,
I gotta tell you, it is hard to be on social media as what you might call like, and we're not this, but and you're not even on social media.
I'm not.
We've talked about this, but it must be hard. I'll say it that way, to be on social media as a church world star and then relate to people outside of the church world, or even from different denominations and different areas, right? Like, I was watching, Twitter is unbelievable for this, but I was watching a guy who kind of hung out a little bit with, who was the guy?
John
Not
Piper
the
or
other guy.
Mark Driscoll?
Mark Driscoll. James McDonald.
Oh yes,
And
yes.
he exited out. He was exited out by his board for humility issues, pride issues, and spending a lot of money, more money than he should have. So they did all this, and so he's taken a lot of slack, and he's still on.
Social media.
Social media, talking a lot. He sends out emails asking for money all the time. He's doing this home church network thing.
Really?
Well, so there's this lady, her name's Jill, I think, or whatever. She has this report, like the buyer's report or the riots, and she's basically an investigative reporter. She does a lot of time on Twitter against churches and against specifically people like this. So he starts bashing her for stuff she wrote and calls her like a hashtag gossip S word.
Wow.
A demeaning lady word. And I'm like, this guy is off his stinking rocker. Like, he's just like, but it must be so easy. I'll give you a story this week of something very small, right? Like, and it's not even on social media. It's kind of like connecting me to the outside world. But we've been playing some music out here through the steeple on Sunday mornings.
Right.
And it gives a good environment. But the last 2 weeks, it's been a little loud, in my personal opinion. So we got an email from a lady during church, a Facebook email, a Facebook message.
Yeah.
From a lady who must be a neighbor.
Yep.
And she basically makes a couple sarcastic comments about, some people might be sleeping, you don't have to turn the music up so loud or whatever, if you're thinking about others. So I apologize. I say, I'm sorry. We'll make sure the music is quieter in the future. Please accept my apology. So she doesn't respond. I know she sees it because it's Facebook Messenger. You can see who sees it. So then I get a little irritated. Like, who do you think you are? Listen, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm saying this is going through my mind.
This is funny.
So I write.
I have no idea where this is going, by the way. I have not heard this story, so I am on the edge of my seat just like you guys are.
So
please
I
continue.
write, have you thought about accepting my apology yet? Question mark. And I still haven't heard back from her in the last 24 hours. Probably won't. We are Facebook friends with several people several of the same people in the community. So we might even be more alike than we realize. But anyways, it's hard sometimes to keep your humility. I decided that I'm not going to write anything else, sarcastic or otherwise. Even though I really just wanted her to say, I accept your apology. That seems like a normal thing to do.
Right.
Any thoughts? Am I being a jerk?
No, you're not being a jerk.
Okay.
I mean, she may have just thought it was like, oh, I'll just send this message like really quickly. Although you said she took the time to write a few sarcastic things in there, but so maybe, I don't know. Maybe she deserved whatever sarcasm she got in return. So
yeah, I don't know. You know what, Jen? That's her name, Jen. Jen, I appreciate your message, and I'm sorry. The music is going to go on next week, just much quieter.
I hope you're listening with headphones right now, Jen, that you can just turn down yourself, because I'm going to edit the audio in to be the same level. So
we are going to continue today and finish the History of Chaffin Church series we started about 4 weeks ago. Last week we did not have it. We talked to my dad. And this week we're going to start from 1978 and go into the future. Now, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. This part is not a super positive conversation. The numbers and the community and there were some good things that happened, but there was a lot of kind of
just hard things, right?
Hard things. A lot of times when a church sees some success, that success, and this is no matter what kind of background, a lot of times that success goes to the people, whoever may be in power, to their head. Well, in a congregational church.
We've all seen that before, yeah.
In a congregational church, the power goes to the people's heads. So it's no different.
Right.
It's not like because there's one person, there's not one person at the helm, we're definitely going to be free from that. It just means there's a lot of people who the success goes to their heads. And they remember all this. So, anyways, we kind of broached this subject a little bit last week, or a few weeks ago, but in 1978, there was a pastor that arrived in 1973 named Robert Rock. I'm not sure if he's still with us. I know his wife occasionally likes some things on Facebook, so she's around. I think her name is Susan, and they have 2 sons, Bill and Steve, and they're all blessed with that Rock last name.
Such a cool last name.
Right? Like, I'm
so jealous.
So, Robert Rock, one of the cool things about Robert Rock is I have this diagram, and if you're on the audio podcast, you will not be able to see this. However, I am not on here, and there are a few other more recent pastors who are not on here, but it's a graph. Is this a bar graph or?
It is a bar graph.
Bar graph, yeah. It's a graph of the years that the pastors have been on here. Well, Robert Rock, it's not even close, was here more years than anyone else, almost twice.
Yeah, it almost looks like double.
It is. It was just under double. I think the next one was Tim Hanley, who was here in the early 2000s. And he was here from 1973 to 1989. And he must have been well liked. It kind of feels like Robert Rock didn't rock the boat a lot. And so it was this kind of peaceful time here at Chaffin Church. They celebrated, of course, their 75th anniversary, and I had that time capsule last week.
No, when you say it was sort of like a peaceful time, like, was the church still growing at this point?
No. So here's what happens, right? You have a plateau, and you have these really...
So this was the plateau, is what you're saying.
This was the plateau.
Yeah.
And you basically had, the addition of the building, and then of course the late 60s brought Vietnam, and this kind of moved into the UCC kind of hardcore. The UCC changed who they were in the midst of that. So what's interesting about that is people kind of stopped going to church a lot of times, especially if you weren't changing your methods.
Right.
But there were some interesting things. A new organ was purchased during this time, so this organ was purchased under Robert Rock. Also, Chaffin began their long-standing tradition of giving food to the Wachusett Food Pantry during this time. And then, there's a lot of pictures, too, of Robert Rock and the gang during this time. So they had lots of suppers, lots of events, lots of good things going on. And then in 1989, Robert and Susan and Bill and Steve, or at least Robert and Susan, moved to Maryland.
Also the year I was born.
Really? 1989?
89.
Okay. So perhaps it had nothing to do with the crab cakes in Maryland. Perhaps they wanted to get away.
They're like, oh my, look at this child. We're getting out of here.
Child.
We're getting out of here.
That's one of the ugliest kids I ever saw.
Look at that face. Only a mother could love that face. I'm out of here.
Oh, man. So there was a few interim pastors after that. From basically September 1990 to November 1990 was a guy named Milton Bartlett. Before that, for a year, was an interim pastor, Robert Johnson. And then in November 1990, Jan Shepherd was called to be the full-time pastor here. And Jan was the first female pastor at Chaffin. I don't have a lot to say about that. We've talked a little bit about it. But Jan, a shout out to you for breaking that barrier.
That's pretty cool. I feel like 1990. I feel like that's like earlier than a lot of other churches. I don't know. Maybe that's just my limited experience in the church world. But I feel like, the denomination that I'm a part of, the UCC. Maybe I guess it's less surprising. But I think in the church as a whole, 1990. I don't know. I guess that.
Well, if you think about it, the UCC is a more progressive.
Right. That's why I say I'm not that surprised because it's the UCC, but I don't know. I just think that's so cool.
Yeah. So she started a Spirit of the Second Century campaign to make some improvements, and they raised some money in 3 years, and then now he was there from 1990, the end of 1990 to 1994, and it actually says this, and I'm not sure how much our church historian, Anne, we're so grateful for, how much she was privy to these conversations, but it says that she believed that pastoring was stressful, and she resigned to go be a youth pastor at the age of 66 in Maynard.
Wow.
I don't know what to say. Because it's so shocking to me that somebody would go at the age of 66. Yeah, this is way too stressful. I'm going to go be a youth pastor. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I spent, what would it have been, 4 or 5 years in youth ministry, if you just count from when I left high school.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think youth ministry can be its own kind of stress. So I'm sort of interested, to just, yeah, I would be interested to hear her reasoning on that that whole issue. I mean, I've never been a senior pastor before, so maybe that has something to do with it. But I was always worrying about my students, like what they were up to, what they were doing, and you'd get calls and Friday night at 3 a.m. Hey, I messed up. I'm drunk. Can you come pick me? Like just stuff like that would happen.
Right. It seems pretty stressful in its own right.
You do less hospital visits, of course, less funerals and stuff like that. But there's a lot more. I'll just teenage angst, right? And a lot more just
parent angst.
Oh yeah, that's another. So that was another thing I used to say. The best part about youth ministry is the students. The worst part is the parents.
Oh,
sorry, parents, but that was the hardest thing. So.
Oh man. So she left and to go youth pastor at 66. I mean, honestly, that sounds crazy to me. So shout out to Jan for doing that. I don't know her, but I wish I did. In September of 1994 to July of 1995, another interim pastor, David Purdy. And then in 1995, Reverend Susan Tiroli became the settled pastor, and she broke ground on the elevator. So that's when the last addition to this church, was in 1995. They built the elevator, and that was in use this last Sunday. So it's still being in use. It's still going strong. However, she resigned in 1996. So at this point, you can see some major problems with unity, right?
Yeah, it kind of seems like there was a series, right? So you have, let me look back here. So you have Jan Shepard. She lasted 4 years, but she resigned because of, well, at least according to our historian, stress, right? The stress of ministry. And then you have David Purdy, you have Susan Tiroli, right? And yeah, that's you get two people that are there for such short periods of time. That's interesting.
From 1989 to 2003, only Jan lasted more than 2 years. Everybody else was done.
And that's sort of like, how they talk about like one-term presidents really never get anything done. You know what I'm talking about? Because you really need that extra time to build a base and get things done. Sometimes I feel the same way about pastors. I think it really takes a year or two to really start to effectively get change going and just to build up your political goodwill with the church members and everything. Marty knows what I mean, right?
You know what I mean? I haven't even started changing things.
You haven't even started.
I mean, we're not even at year 2.
Right.
So, yeah, a few other pastors came in the 2000s, and they came in and went out faster than spit on steel. That's a metaphor I just came up with, and I wanted to write it down. I wanted to share it with you.
On steel.
So then Tim Hanley came in. He was an interim from 2000 to January 2001, and then he left, and they found, the search committee found Richard Wright, who used to be the moderator in the 60s and 70s.
That's interesting.
Right? But he was a WPI professor, retired, biology, and that was in February 2001. By October 2002, that went bad because of, quote, irreconcilable differences.
Man, there's just some really vague stuff going on in this history. It's like ministry was stressful, irreconcilable differences, right? It's like these very, I love Ann to death though. She did such a good job. Can we just say, like, Ann, if you're watching this, listening to this, thank you so much. Ann Alt, who you've probably heard in the past. How old is she? She's
So I was thinking about this. She told me she was 97 in March, the March of COVID. So she's 98.
Wow.
And sometime between now and March, she would be 99.
And she wrote all of this stuff down, some of which she has written very recently, from what I've heard. So
yeah, I mean, because I'm in there. We won't really talk. Well, we'll talk a little bit about it. But so then Tim Hanley comes back, and he pastors from January 2003 to 2012. Now we're getting to the point where you and I actually began to work together, right? 2012, and Tim told me, I meet with a group of pastors and have met with a group of pastors from Holden. Tim told me that he believed that the church had 5 years max. So whatever was going down, it was going down fast. And he was in it, and the church wasn't growing, and they were taking care of the building. But what ended up happening is this. He retired, or he resigned. He ended up going to a church in Ocam. I've actually talked to him in the last couple years.
Really? Oh, he's in Ocam now. Okay.
Yeah, he's in Ocam, and I wanted to kind of pick his brain in the first couple months. And so we talked, had a good conversation. And him and I always had a good rapport. He's a fantastic guy, a hilarious guy. I know why he was able to do as well as he did during this time. He's a good guy. But he retired, and they brought in March of 2013, Diane Dugan, and she was a designated term pastor. Now, the UCC denomination has 3 types of pastors that or they might have more, but this constitution says they have an interim pastor, a designated term pastor, and a settled pastor. An interim pastor is what that is. A designated term pastor is somebody who comes in and does a very specific thing. So Diane was kind of a therapist. That was kind of her part-time gig as well. So her thing was reconciliation and trying to bring unity to this crowd of
sort of
people.
like emotionally healthy spirituality kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
have you ever read that book, by the way? It's a really good book.
I haven't.
Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. We should,
Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Yeah, really good. I forget the author's name, but it's good for everyone, not just pastors. Very, very good book.
Thank you.
Pick it up.
Now, so during all this time, there were some positive things happening, like fairs and stained glass windows and traditions and
do you think that was the time when the community famous spaghetti dinners began?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, Christine started that. Christine Flood started so the Swedish suppers is what they were known for, right?
Swedish
Swedish
dinners,
meatballs and all that. So
did you know
Yeah.
that Swedish meatballs did not originally come from Sweden?
I did not know that. They came from IKEA.
They did not. They actually came from Turkey.
I'm almost offended at this story.
So what happened is a bunch of Swedish people traveled through Turkey and Constantinople during the Second Crusade, and when they went back to Sweden, they brought back this recipe that looked something like what Swedish meatballs are today, and that recipe has since sort of just died off in Turkey, but it remained in Sweden as Swedish meatballs.
I did not. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You never know the kind of information you're going to get in this podcast, and that is gold. You make sure you take that to your water coolers as soon as they open up again.
Yes, and tell yourselves as you go to IKEA and buy the Swedish meatballs there that
and they're so good, so good.
Where they're from. Yep.
So one of the things during Diane Dugan's term here that did save the church financially, and I would be remiss not to mention this, is that Little Hearts Daycare came in, and they were a part of Jessica began attending the congregation. This emotionally healthy, that was a little bit sarcastic, congregation. And they began to host their preschool here, and it somewhat took off. And so they paid rent for months, and that helped the church to stabilize their finances a little bit. So before I came, I always wondered, like, how did they keep going? Well, that was one of the ways. After Tim, somebody came in and they started the preschool. And then Diane Dugan left, and a guy by the name of Court Yao came in. And Court was hilarious. He was a stand-up comedian at one point.
Really?
Yeah, like he dabbled in that. And I knew him, of course, with the Holden clergy. Got to meet him a few times. Was a great guy. However, and so this was his first pastorate. Like, he had only become a Christian a few years before.
Really?
So can you imagine becoming a Christian, becoming a pastor, and then walking into, and he lived an hour and like 20 minutes away.
You know,
and walking into this environment.
I have seen that happen a lot of times in my day job, because one of the things that I did for several years before I came into my current role at the church denomination that I work at was congregational vitality, which is, helping churches that have existed for a while continue to be healthy. And some of those congregations are already doing pretty well. We want to help them be better.
Yes.
But some of those other congregations are really not doing well. You know, we have people sort of all over the spectrum, or churches all over the spectrum.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of churches that are sort of in trouble, I don't know why I see this a lot, but I see them taking on pastors that live very far away. You know, like
really?
One of the churches in this area that I worked with a number of years ago now had a pastor who lived like on the Cape. It was like an hour and 20 minutes, without traffic, to get to the church on Sundays. So it was like, and then now this was before, Zoom became, super ubiquitous anyway. And it was an older person, so they weren't going to use Zoom anyway. They weren't going to keep in contact, right? They probably weren't on social media. And so it's just it's really funny. I've seen that a lot. I wonder if there's something to that.
So 2 stories about Court that I think are relevant, and I'm telling the stories because I have vowed to say what I think in this podcast.
Right.
So first of all, I think Court is a tremendous fellow. He's the only person I knew other than Tim Hanley on this list. And I found this out recently, is that I had called up the phone number here when we were at Fellowship, and we were looking for office space when we were moving away from we were moving away from Bullard Street, and we were trying to find like places to go, and I called them up, and somebody had told me that we could have office space. And then I called them back and they stopped answering. So one of the things I found out is that I think it was Court, he didn't know me at the time.
Yep.
So he gave the preschool more space. He charged them, but gave the preschool more space quickly so they wouldn't give us office space. Now,
that's really funny. I never knew that.
I found it out in the last year. And I don't. He didn't know me he knew them, and I'm sure they could have used the finances, but I totally get that. So the second thing is this: he must have gone through it. I remember at my past church over at Mount View, when we were meeting at Mount View, we had Saturday night services, and I had a lady come over and want to meet with me. I had no idea who this lady was. And we talked a little bit, and she was from this church. And in a temporary setup, you are like, and by the way, she doesn't go to this church. She hasn't since I've been here.
Okay.
In a temporary setup, you're portable. You don't have a lot of time to get ready, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like getting ready, and she wants to talk. So she comes, and for 45 minutes, she just blasts Court. Like, just destroys him. Destroys him.
Oh, no. Court, if you're listening, man, we love you. We love you so much, bro.
So I'm like, listen, I don't know. I'm not a part of this. If you'd like me to talk to Court, I can, but I don't know that he's wrong. You don't know that he's wrong. I don't know that he's wrong. I don't know anything. And it was just, he must have gone through so much. And so he basically resigned. He was supposed to be here for 3 years as a designated term pastor. He was just resigned early. And so at that point, I was leaving my past church, and the board, I knew somebody. I put out the word that I could come and speak in a temporary basis if they needed it. But I was going to Spain with my family first. I was going to take a little extended vacation. And I said, and we went there, and I brought Al. And we had a conversation, and they spent 2 hours destroying their former pastors. Destroying their former pastors.
It's not a good start.
Oh my gosh. So they were like, so when do you think you could do it? And I said, well, I'm going to be in Spain a long time. I'll get back to you. And I walked out of there. You could ask Al this. I walked out of there going, I don't think I could ever pastor at that church. Ever. This is a true story. So we went to Spain, and one of the people did call me. And I was like, I'll give you 2 weeks. So I preached the first week, and it was definitely old school. Like it was, but I remember thinking how refreshing it was to not have so much pressure, to walk in, to preach, and to not feel like everything had to be perfect. I could just be me and preach, and people responded, and
so it definitely, and that was helpful for you because the church you were at before, everything had to be perfect. They had the high production value, and
Correct.
So if you had too many ums or ahs in your sermon, they would get on you for it, like that kind of level thing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I went over and over. I practiced my speaking parts, which was not my message, just like the welcome and the closing, and I had to get everything just right. And so the second week I went back with a much better feel, like just in a good mood. And afterwards they had a meeting. And in the meeting, it was with the UCC. And essentially the meeting director, the area director said, you guys need to shut it down. And of course they were bucking against that. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what I could do, but I would hope that I could do something, because I don't live an hour and a half away. If I live 4 minutes down the road, maybe there's something I could do to help this church.
Right.
And maybe there's something they could do to help me, right?
I like how specific this part of the history is. It's not just like Marty came in and changed some stuff, sorry, Ann. I like it. I like the specificity. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I put my hat in the ring.
Yeah.
And this is kind of how I want to finish this part, is that we came in, there were 24 members. This is after, we've talked about it, hundreds and hundreds of members in the 60s. By the 90s, there were 100. Into the early 2000s, it just continued to dwindle until there were 24 members. 19-0 was the vote. So in other words, not all the members were here that day. And then our new board came in. You know, we grew quickly before COVID, and our new board was voted unanimously. So all of these things are happening, and now it's this different feel. And this is where I want to go into the future in the remaining time we have. Because the future looks a little bit like the past, in that the Swedish immigrants came in, and their message, they wanted to share the good news of Jesus, the gospel of Jesus, or share the gospel with the love of Jesus. Now they added specifically to the Scandinavian immigrants in this area.
So we've edited that tiny, you know, we've edited out the Scandinavian part because, I mean, there's a lot more than Scandinavians here now, but
yeah,
but that's the only part we've edited out, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now we're in this area where thousands of cars are driving by. But I hear this, never have people felt so lonely. I've had police officers tell me that. I've had people in the community tell me that. Never have people felt so lonely. But what we can do here at Chaffin is teach one another to be real and alive in Christ through example. In other words, teaching one another. In other words, maybe not sending that email being sarcastic to the lady. And conversation, not just one on 100, but one-on-one at times, having real conversation with one another, which I think we can bring life to our wider community. And each week, we're growing. Each week, we're finding life after COVID. And I'm beginning to think that this transition is going to be a successful one. I've been here almost 2 years. A lot has changed. I will say mostly because of COVID. I mean, everyone changed because of COVID, right?
Oh, we had to, yeah.
And so a few things, we've talked about this and I've preached messages on this, but a few things I just want to throw out there. Unity. As a church, we have to be unified together. Not just with one another, but with the wider church body outside of this. You know, what are some ways, what do you think? How do we build community, Ryan? And you're a part of a denomination. Like, how do we do that other than just sticking ourselves in a building? Like, is there another way?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing a lot of them already, right? We got our community cookouts.
Yep.
You know, we've thought about the idea of small groups before. So that I know we're talking about future right now. So some sort of small group. We don't really fully know the ways that those will look, but those will be happening eventually. So those of you who are listening to the podcast or viewing it right now, you have a little bit of an inside track into some of the conversations that are going on behind the scenes. But I mean, I think beyond that, like the Sunday morning, you know, services experience here can be part of it as well, right?
Yeah.
Like the way we connect with people there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And honestly, like if any of you guys are listening right now or are thinking about coming to Chaffin for the first time, I think, you know, Sunday morning is sort of an ideal place to show up to do that. But if you don't feel comfortable with Sundays, see, that's okay too, because then we have those community cookouts. We're going to have small groups starting soon again.
Food and coat drive.
Food and coat drive, that's another huge thing. There's something so special, even if you're not totally into the God thing, doesn't it just feel great to help people and
Absolutely.
And doing it alongside other people? Like there's a lot of good things happening there.
Actually, I got another email today, not very same week. On Saturday, a few Saturdays ago, they did the food and coat drive here like they do. And they met a lady who wants to help regularly. She's a business owner in the area. She owns a cleaning company. And she stopped in, and she wanted to find out, what are you guys doing? Well, we're just here every month doing this. This is our missions team. And she wants to be an active participant in our missions team. I got an email from her. I'm going to connect her to the guys that she talked to. No idea if she believes in Jesus or anything. All we know is she wants to be a light in her community. So that is a open door for us to share with her the gospel and also live out the gospel and help her to do the same thing in her community, in our community.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
Unity, and this is kind of the next thing, outward reaching. To be outward reaching, we don't want to be a church that's focused on ourselves.
Right.
Come on. We got to get out there. We got to reach out. We got to not be lazy and complacent. The missions team's doing a great job there. Speaking of which, remembering the poor, always remembering the poor, always remembering there are people out there who may not be as blessed as us. And we don't do it in a judgmental way or just in a self-sacrificial way.
Right.
How can I offer love to those people, to my brothers and sisters in humanity? Humility in our suffering. Man, we are not promised good things, as much as Joel Osteen says. And love the guy, whatever.
We were just talking about him earlier.
We were. We're doing a callback there. Not all the time are we going to escape suffering. My dad told a joke last week, and I can't remember it, but it had to do with marriage and suffering. It was 50 years of it was pretty funny. My mom laughed. There you go. But we need to remain humble in our suffering. Fifth, holiness. Not in a staying away from bad things sort of way. In other words, this is not a sanctuary to keep us away from all the bad things that are out there. But holiness in that we are staying on the course that God has called us to. And so that might be different for you than it is for me. That might mean you can't go to movies because maybe they take you off the course. I will be going to movies on Father's Day, another callback.
There you go.
And so we are called to be holy. The disciples talked about that. And then finally, Jesus is Lord. Just proclaiming that Jesus is God. He's our Savior. He is good. He's risen. And we are following him to be a light in this dark world. And so, you know what? We're just going to be a light. I guess that's the best metaphor I can. I'm tired of just building a system to get people to come here. I want people to come here. I want people to feel like this is their home. But that will best happen when we are reflecting Jesus from here and outside of here, everywhere we can go. And just recalling that vision from 1903, sharing the gospel with the love of Jesus. Not with our systems, not with our piano and organ, not with the things that used to happen, but with love. With love. I love you, Ryan.
Love you too, man.
I love you guys. Thanks for... the future is bright. The future is bright. Not that we won't go through hard things, because we will. But the future is bright because we're going to put Jesus first. We're going to follow him. And we are going to love one another, as it says so many times in Scripture. And I'm excited about this journey that we are on together. And please don't hate me as a result of something I've said on this podcast. I feel like this has been an interesting podcast, but I've said it's been some it's hard to look at your history and to see that maybe you didn't get it all right.
Honestly, I think we have to critique our history.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, that's good.
As George Santayana said, which is commonly quoted to Einstein, which he did say it, but he was quoting Santayana, you know, if we do not study our history, we are doomed to repeat it, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and I think part of that study is picking out the things that you like and you don't like, right? Like saying,
Yeah.
hey, I don't think I like that this happened, you know, especially in our community. And, you know, it's part of our history, so we have to realize that. But I mean, especially, you know, the senior pastor, you got to do that. You got to say, hey, this is something that, you know what, a lot of people that are still here even went through, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's no one exists in any organization in a cultural vacuum, because even if your organization is brand new, your people have a history. No one is just born one day and goes to a church the next. They usually can't get there on their own, right?
Yeah.
When they're a day old. So, you know, everyone has a history. Every church has a history. So I'm glad for our church's history in a lot of ways, because it's brought us here. But
Yep.
yeah, it looks like there was some hard stuff, right?
You know, when I talked about the boards changing out, and the first board was also relatively new, except
Right.
for one or two people. But one of the things that they had to go through mentally, the old board, and in some ways, I think there were some casualties here. I mean that metaphorically. One of the things that they had to go through was that they were in leadership in the midst of this, right? And so sometimes it's like me when I look back at my time at fellowship, and then when I ask myself, did I make the right move in when we merged with Next Level, right? There are a lot of good things that happened during that time.
Right.
And it also, I realized that really horrible things that happened.
Right.
And I was leading the charge in that. And so it's hard, and I want to give a shout out. I think this is a good place to give a shout out to Christine Flood, who made that transition, has made that transition. And I don't think she's always found it easy, but generally speaking, she's done a pretty good job of moving through that.
You know what? I haven't been here as long as you, so I came at some many months after you had been here, but
Yeah.
but I have seen Christine go through, you know, at least the last 18 months of that, and I am also very impressed with that. I mean, well, she's been through a lot of this history, like most of this history today that we actually went through. So
We just changed our nursery area to a different place downstairs in what was added in like 1942 or something. And it was a garage, but it was also, when she was a baby, it was the nursery. She's 33, 34, 35, so however that would have, like 30 years ago, 32 years ago, it was a nursery. And so she's gone through a lot of change. You're right, and she's done a great job. So thanks, Christine, and thanks, Ann, again, and for all of those who participated in this history, including August and Anna Pearson, the first married couple, and everyone involved. A lot of people come in and out and say, hey, I've been to that church. I've done Zumba at that church. I've been at a fair at that church. Well, feel free to come by and visit us any Sunday at 10 a.m. We should finish up, though. The rest of it's pretty short. We got 54 minutes, so that's good.
Oh.
Chaffin Good news. Just two things here. Olivia Goulet. Olivia was awarded the grand prize today by Mrs. Gustafson for being the winner of the Rutland Lions Club Peace Poster Contest. She won. She made a poster to support peace. And the Rutland Lions Club gave her an award for that. Great job, Olivia. It's a beautiful piece of art. You can go on Facebook and check it out. Also, Al and Erica Dancy, at the time of this filming, they are celebrating their anniversary. Today, June 15th. Which he told me this morning. I didn't know that. I would have just...
Which anniversary is it, Marty? Mr. Dates?
No idea.
No idea.
Well, here's the problem.
I'm very surprised right now.
I don't know that I went to their wedding. I think I was invited. But it was at one of those periods in my life, in my 20s, where somebody would send me an invitation. So I wasn't in the wedding. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like I had to be an usher or a groomsman. So it was one of those like, well, I could hang out and play video games, or I could go to this wedding. And I didn't, it was, so if I were to guess, I would say 2001, 2002. But I don't think it's their 20th. So 18th or 19th.
Cool.
There you go. Then announcements. Every Thursday, community cookout. Last week, we did it at the church, and it was fantastic. I'm playing some time games here. We did it at this next week, it is going to be at, I got to think here, what's the date?
This coming Sunday is the 20th.
The 20th. So this next week, it's going to be at the Dancy's, the very same people who are celebrating their anniversary. 9 Inwood Road in Worcester.
And that is on Tuesday?
Thursday.
Thursday the
Thursday
24th.
Nights. Every Thursday from 6 to 8. My good friend, Ryan Thompson, has not been to one yet because he's so busy.
I haven't. And you know what's funny is I'm not even going to be at this one either.
He's also not an extrovert.
Because I'm going to be in Minneapolis.
It's true.
So,
that's awesome.
although I'm going to be around a lot more people than will be at the cookout.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
So you are not an extrovert, Marty. You are not an extrovert.
Oh, man. June 27th is our annual congregational meeting.
Yes.
If you are a member, be there. It's going to be so much fun.
I know we're running up on an hour here, but
time.
I have to say this, okay? A lot of you guys might think the annual meetings, even if you're a member, you might think these annual meetings are like super dull and boring affairs. And I will grant you, there's a lot of information, right? And so it might remind you of, a class in school in some way. Marty is filming me right now. I don't know why.
I just took a picture.
He took a picture of me. We'll talk about that later because I'm not done with my rant yet. So, so basically though, I just want to say, congregational meetings are just really spiritual because the work of the church is the work of God. God's work is the church's work. And so anytime you're going to a congregational meeting, what you are doing there, what you're engaging in is a profoundly spiritual act. So it's a very big deal. And everything we're just talking about today with sort of the future of Chaffin, we all have a role in that. And honestly, lot of those things come directly out of these congregational meetings because we are a congregational church, and our church governance, the way we govern our church, is with congregational polity, which means the power in the congregation resides in the congregation. So it's spiritual, it's practical, but things are going to happen there. Cool things, good things.
Good things.
Please, if you're a member, be there. If you're not a member, you're welcome to show up, but you can't vote. But we'd love to have you. We'd love to host you there. So
unless you're cantankerous, and then please stay home.
Yes, please. If you're gonna be rowdy, please.
If you're a member and you're cantankerous, that's fine.
Yes, we may even have it on Zoom. I'm not sure what the end result of that was. But if you're going to be rowdy, you can watch it on Zoom and be rowdy all you want.
There you go. We
watch
can just
it like
mute
a sports
that
game. Yeah.
All right. That's great stuff, dude. July 3rd and 10th, we'll be working as a church for Oak and Sparrow. You can sign up for that at chaffin.church. Also, July 10th, we'll have a food and coat drive. So the missions team will be really active in July, making stuff happen. Thank you so much for checking this out. We're at an hour. If you're interested in giving back to God what's already His anyways, or supporting the podcast or the church in any way, you can do that at chaffin.church/giving. And we are so thankful to those of you who do that on a regular basis, or for those of you who do that a one-time basis. Thank you for that. You can also text any amount to 84321 or send your gift to 155 Shrewsbury Street in Holden. Hey, don't forget, rate, subscribe, and share the podcast. We love you. This has been good news. Now go
and give some out.